Hey everybody, I'm Evan Marriott of Joe Millionaire from Fox, and I'm getting ready to do an interview with the one, the only, Kevin Hannibal.
This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV.com, and today is my special guest. He doesn't want to be known as a wrestler, but he's had a couple wrestling matches. He was the star of Joe Millionaire that once had somewhere between 38 and 40,000 or 40 million actual viewers and a 20.4 share, which is crazy because a 20.4 rating compared to wrestling now that actually has a 0.4 rating. He's been on The Simpsons. He's been on Howard Stern. He's been on Charmed. Now he's on the Hannibal TV. Evan Marriott, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, Evan. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Glad I wasn't stuck in traffic all morning like you with that brutal LA traffic.
Yeah, that wasn't one of my better ideas to go out when I knew I had to do this, but we made it, right?
Exactly. And yeah, I've been caught in that California traffic. I do like that state a lot, but the traffic is brutal.
Yeah, it's what you did. I mean, it's actually with COVID and everything, it's actually lightened up, if you can believe that. You wouldn't have known it today, but it has lightened up quite a bit.
How are things there with the lockdown? Things are still pretty closed up here in Canada. Are they more open there?
They were shut down. All the restaurants and bars were shut down, and then they opened back up. And then they're kind of doing there's a lot of restaurants here that are building outside facilities, decks and whatnot on the streets so they can still stay open, which is good. I mean, you got to figure out a way to keep these businesses open. And so they're trying to here in California, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
And you're looking more like a wrestler than ever. You don't really look the same as none of us do 20 years ago. But a lot of people probably don't know that you were actually a big wrestling fan growing up in, I believe, Virginia. How was your childhood and growing up a fan living in Horseman country?
Well, I was really fortunate, Devin, because I grew up in the Tidewater area, which was Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Newport News. And because we were kind of centrally located there in the mid-Atlantic area, we got the feed for WWE, which was WWF back in the day, back in the early 80s, late 80s. And so we would get the WWF at the time on Saturday mornings, and Sundays at noon we got All American Wrestling. But then we would get Worldwide Wrestling, and which was on Saturday afternoons, and we would get obviously the TBS 605 program, and then we'd get an hour on Sunday of WCW, which is NWA. And then in the afternoons after school, you could run home, and if you were into the AWA, which was kind of a fledgling, organization that towards the 80s, ESPN aired the at least in our area, ESPN aired an hour of AWA at 4:00 in the afternoon. And then you also have, which I don't know if you guys got in Canada, we got Monday night, which was primetime wrestling with, started out with Jesse and Gorilla, and then ended up going to, correct me if I'm wrong, Heenan and Gorilla.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So we got a good little mix of wrestling in Virginia Beach, where I grew up, and I'm very fortunate. We got to see a lot of different programs.
Did you get to make it out to any of the live shows? I know NWA ran a lot in that area in the Crockett's.
Yes, we did. I was a big National Wrestling Alliance fan, and my dad. It was funny because a lot of kids, when they're young, they have memories of their father taking them to their first baseball game or football game, and I just remember my dad bringing home tickets to an NWA event at the Scope in Norfolk, and this was, I think, in '86. And the main event was Blanchard It was Blanchard, Luger. I could have this wrong, but I believe it was Blanchard, Luger, and Flair against Dusty and the Road Warriors. And
Wow.
yeah, it was just a great time in general for wrestling fans. I'm very fortunate to have grown up in that era.
Speaking of Blanchard, she used to be managed, or he used to be managed by Baby Doll, and she commented on the post that I had made on Facebook about interviewing you. So I guess you guys have a bit of a personal relationship.
Yeah, we connected through social media, as a lot of people do, quite a few years ago. And I, I mean, you know, people that you watched when you were younger that you saw in storylines and stuff like that, especially NWA being my favorite, all of her storylines with Tully and Dusty. I mean, it was a thrill for me to have somebody like her from that era that would give me the time of day on social media. But she's a sweet gal. I like her a lot. We haven't talked in a while, but yeah, I know she's in Carolina somewhere. I think she's married to a guy that's a wrestler. Chad is his name. I can't think of his last name.
Okay, I interviewed her a couple months ago. I think she actually lives in Texas now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, because
Well, she's from Texas, isn't she?
I do believe so. Yeah, because her dad owned territory there or something.
Yeah.
But one of the coolest things about your whole Joe Millionaire experience is all of the famous wrestlers you got to interact with out of that. But before we get into that part, let's talk about how you became involved in that show. It ended up being a huge hit. As I mentioned in the introduction, a 20.4 rating, which is crazy. That's the biggest rating Raw ever did was like an 8.2. Biggest rating Saturday night's main event ever did was like a 16 point something. So to put that into wrestling perspective, those are crazy numbers. But is this something that you wanted to do, become involved in reality TV, or did it kind of just fall on your lap?
This Devin, this fell in my lap, and it all stemmed from a chance meeting with some producers for Fox at a Christmas party the year prior. Um, I had some friends from when I worked up in LA that had invited me up for a Christmas party. It was like, "What are you doing this weekend?" Nothing. Come up for a Christmas party. This is literally that's as easy as it was, and it just so happened to be that 8 months later they were doing a show, and they happened to remember they couldn't find a guy, and from what I was told after the fact, they went through a couple thousand guys and they couldn't find. Either they had an arrest warrant or they had an STD or and I'm not kidding. I mean they said there were all these guys and they said, what about they asked one of my friends, they said, what about what about Evan, is he single? And he goes, well, we'll see. And that's how it all started.
Wow. So I guess the STD check was a prerequisite.
Well, yeah, and I started to think, man, gosh, I mean, I have no like chink in my armor, according to them. I mean, I've led a pretty boring life. I was kind of offended, but whatever, you know.
Were you a ladies' man before that? Obviously, you had to be good with the girls to be cast on a show like this.
I don't, I don't know about me being a ladies' man, but I mean, I mean, yeah, I mean, it didn't. Well, let's put it this way: before I got into the show, and I had been training a lot, and I was very into fitness and stuff. So when you run in those circles, and you're at Gold's Gym, and you've got half naked girls running around, working out, yeah, you tend to you tend to test the waters probably more than you should.
Did you train at the original Gold's Gym in Venice?
Yeah, that was an interesting thing because I was training there and I ran into a fella. Well, actually, that's not true. I was friends with a guy named Paul Bavay. His brother was Matt Bavay, who owned Bavay Gyms in Phoenix. And he just happened to be working out in Gold's. And we just started talking. And he said, "Hey, you know my brother Paul and his wife Christy?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, he said, "Hey, I'm going to start a supplement company, and what are you doing now?" And I said, "Well, I'm working at a hotel." I was at the time, I was working as a bellhop. Can you imagine me
Yeah.
schlepping your bag? And I'm schlepping bags at a hotel, a 5-star hotel. I don't know if I like it. He goes, "Well, I need a salesman," and that's how it all started. So he actually leased an office space right across from Gold's Gym in Venice. And I said, "You can move into the apartment upstairs." So I lived above Gold's for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And so that was a thrill because we'd have all kinds of people come through our doors, like Lou Ferrigno and Torrey Wilson and Tim Salmon from which I believe at the time he was with the San Diego Padres. But yeah, so we always, and because it was easy, we were giving away free, and it was a horrible supplement too. It would give you the shits. It was horrible. But yeah, no, I had the opportunity to work out over there, and it was fun, a lot of fun.
I've heard that Arnold still trains there every morning at like 7:30 a.m. Was he training when you were training there?
Never saw Arnold there. Never saw Arnold there. I saw Lou there all the time, and it was one of those things, Devin, that you didn't go up and go, "Hey," I saw him anyway at the office across the street, but no one really bothered him, you know. But there were a lot of looky-loos that would come through there because it's known as the Mecca. It's known as the place for bodybuilding. So there would be a lot of people that would come through with cameras and take pictures of celebrities that hope to see celebrities that they saw.
But I guess as someone that's grown up around LA, seeing celebrities, it's something you're used to. It's nothing out of the ordinary.
I didn't grow up in LA. I grew up in Virginia Beach,
Oh,
Virginia.
of course. But you live
Yeah,
there. You've just lived there the past, what, 20 years, 30
yeah,
years?
yeah. I moved there. I came out for about a month in '97. Realized that I liked it. Went back, got a car, moved back, and I've been here since, 97, 98.
You sent me that one picture where you looked like a bigger version of Rick Rude. You had the abs, but your shoulders and arms were bigger. How often were you training around that time?
I was going in twice a day. And I was, yeah, I mean, I was fanatical about it, but of course, I'm at that young age where I wasn't watching what I was eating either. God knows what I would have looked like had I been actually watching my diet. I was eating burgers and, I was trying to get bigger, but I just happened to have a frame that was carrying, was able to carry the muscle well, and so I was fortunate in that respect.
So, when you're training twice a day, what would your split look like?
Oh, I would do just your typical, your back and buys, and then I would do a chest and tries. I worked out with Joe DeAngelis, and Joe loved to squat. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with Joe DeAngelis, but he was a professional bodybuilder, and I believe he was Mr. America, maybe Mr. USA. But he was a huge squatter, loved and squats and deadlifts, and he never hesitated to tell me when I sucked. He would tell me when I did well, but he would also tell me when I didn't do so hot. So he was kind of good for me when he showed up. He always showed up. If we had to work out at 3, he'd show up at 4. So thank God I lived across the street.
What were your personal best squat, bench, and deadlifts?
Oh God, oh God. Devin, I was not a. It was, I think for a bench, which I always tell people, you're not your strength isn't measured necessarily off your bench. It'd probably be more your squat. Am I wrong? So, but my bench was probably, it was nothing impressive. It was probably 405 but I could rep it. I don't know what my personal best would be, but 405 for 8 or 10. Which is nothing great. And then my squat probably a 550 for a couple. I mean, I got long legs. I got a long way to go.
Yeah.
I'm 6'5", so if I was shorter, I'd have less of a path to travel, and I could probably squat. I know guys like Lee Priest, the guys that were like 5'2", they
Yeah.
could squat. They could rep stuff 600-700 pounds. But
So, how old would you have been when you were going through that casting process for Joe Millionaire?
28.
20. Yeah, okay. At what point did they fill you in on the concept of the show where they were going to present you as a millionaire and you'd have to keep this act going until the last day of the show?
I'm sorry. What was the question again?
Like, at what point did the producers of the show reveal the concept to you that it wasn't like your average dating show, that they would pretend that you're an actual millionaire?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, they over the course of them kind of courting me to be on the show, I was living in Orange County at the time, and I didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. And I wasn't making a lot of money in construction. It was more than 19,000 that they claimed. I was probably making about 40 grand, but to live in California is extremely expensive. Anyway, I would travel at the end of the day to LA from Orange County, which can be sometimes as much as 2 hours, depending on the traffic. And they weren't really telling me a whole lot. They would kind of I would jump through a hoop and they would say, okay, now jump through another hoop. Okay, now we need this. So one day during a meeting, I just basically told them, I said, look, I can't keep coming up here anymore. If you're going to use me for this show that you've got an idea for, because it was just an idea at the time. If you're going to use it for the show, let me know now, because I don't think this is for me. And their standards and practices guy basically said, can I see you out in the hallway? And I said, yeah. And he said, this is, and he kind of showed me some papers. He goes, pulled back 3 papers. And he goes, this is, if you just be patient with us, this is what we're going to pay you. And it was $50,000. So I said, okay, I think I can calm down for that and kind of make a couple more trips. And then like a week later, after they, said, okay, you're our man. We need you to come up here because we're going to discuss the actual premise of the show. And they had me meet them at a hotel in Universal City Walk at a penthouse. And we sat down with the executive producer, and he explained the show, and I signed the non-disclosure agreement. And literally 2 days later, I was in France.
Wow.
Yeah, they wanted to whisk me off so I couldn't open my big mouth.
Was it something that you thought was kind of cool when you realized you'd have to work the girls? I know during the show they painted you as someone that was really uncomfortable with not telling the females that you weren't really a millionaire, but you never know with these reality shows how much is scripted and how much isn't.
I'm not so sure that it was me being sick of carrying on this charade. It was as much as we would go, the part of the show that was really difficult for me was that they would call them dates, but yet, a date could be 4 or 5 hours in an evening. I would be with these girls for about the length of a dinner, and then they would whisk them away someplace, and I would go someplace, and I was having to get to know these girls over an hour and a half dinner. And there was a lot of lighting involved, so we'd have to stop, and they'd have to redo this light. It was just very, very unnatural, and I never could figure out. I told somebody after the show, right after the show, I didn't know how they were going to carry on other shows like this because it was just such a clusterfuck, the whole filming of it. And I think I was just over it. At that point, I didn't care what they paid me. I was tired, and I was just over it. I just wanted to get back home.
Which of the girls had the best body, in your opinion?
Oh, Sarah had a good body. There was a girl that I let go, not Melissa Joe, but there was another Melissa. I can't think of her last name, but she had a pretty good body, dark hair. Zora's body wasn't. I mean, Zora looks really good today. I haven't talked to her in a long time, but I've seen her in pictures. She does infomercials all the time. I don't know if you guys, how many infomercials you get up in Canada, but she does infomercials for screen doors and all kinds of stuff.
I haven't had cable for about 10 or 15 years at this point. I just watch Netflix and YouTube, but that's cool that she's still making money.
Yeah.
It's funny, a lot of people personally messaged me questions to ask you. I guess they were embarrassed to publicly post this, but there's something called the slurp heard round the world I'm supposed to ask you about. Do you remember?
Yeah. Well, for starters, I don't ever remember being my kissing skills being that loud and sloppy. I don't. So I think a lot of that was dubbed in, and I think it was done for effect. The They did that. This is a story for you. I was I probably wasn't the easiest as time went on in the filming. I probably wasn't the easiest person to deal with on that set. Um, and so I started just having fun, messing with the production people. Whereas at one time, I actually had to be called out on it by a producer. Ray Giuliani was the one that did the interview. So when you would see me talking about a certain date or something, you didn't see Ray. Ray was the one doing the interview, but they were just using sound bites from our interview. But so this one particular night, so these chateaus were in the middle of nowhere, like literally in the middle of nowhere. So at night, and in the French countryside, it's not like America or one of these other, countries where there's just, you've got street lights everywhere, and you've got neighborhoods that are lit up. I mean, it's when the sun goes down in the French countryside, it is black. I mean, it is dark. And one night, for some odd reason, Sarah and I were going on some walk, and I don't even know, with a flashlight or something. I don't even know what we were doing. It's kind of a haze, but I just looked at her and I said, "Hey, let's have a little fun with these guys. Let's turn our mics off." And because I think, oh, I know what had happened. They needed to change tape, or they needed to do something. The camera crew that was with us, so they asked us to stop. That's what it was. And so while we're waiting for them to fix their shit, uh, I looked at Sarah and I said, and I don't think I've told this story often, but I said, let's turn our mics off and let's just keep walking. And she started laughing. She's like, okay. So uh, the production, the guy that was with the film crew, because it was like a 3-man film crew. You get the guy with the boom mic, and then you got the guy. We can hear them saying, "Hey guys, stop! Guys, stop! Don't go too far. We won't be able to find you." Well, we ran away. We totally just took off, and we actually got down under some bushes. And the thing is, Devin, is that it was scary as shit out there, and you couldn't see anything. And we were so far from the chateau that the camera guy and the boom guy and whatever producer was with them, we could hear them like scared shitless. How do we get out of here? Do you know the way back? I mean, it was pitch black, and she and I are sitting there just kind of laughing and kidding around. And so I've always thought that they did the slurping scene as kind of a jab back to me in their editing, because supposedly it pissed off people all the way up to the network, because they were reporting back to the network what was going on every day or every couple of days. And this was before you could like send something over computer. Like, I don't even know what the technology is now, but you had to actually physically mail a tape. I mean, it's hard to believe that just in 2002 we were still mailing tapes, but that's what they did. You didn't send it in a file on a computer. At least it's not what I was told. So anyway, yeah, Ray Giuliani was pissed. The next day, he was told to sit down with me and tell me never to do that again, or they were going to pack up and go home. And I knew they weren't going to pack up and go home. We were near the end, and I'm like, "You're not going to scrap." I was that smart. I was like, "You're not going to scrap millions of dollars of production just because she and I ran away and hid from your camera crew." I mean, come on. But anyway.
How far were you going with these girls when you guys had your dates and your overnight encounters?
Couldn't do a whole lot, Devin. I mean, I get the question all the time, "Hey, how many of those girls did you bang?" You couldn't do anything, because there was all these, unless you wanted to shoot a porn, you couldn't. There were cameras everywhere, so you couldn't get away to have your own. See, that's what would have been better, as if not for the sake of fucking, but that's what would have been better, if they had just given us time to get to know each other, and it would have become more natural, and then films. But they're in the mindset, we can't miss a moment. So if they do something that we're not around to see, we got to catch it on film. And a lot of times that can get in the way, you know. but it worked out. Obviously, it worked out. It got good viewers, so did something right.
So in the scenes, for instance, where you're in bed with the girls, there's actually a camera crew in the room with you. It's not just remote cameras recording.
No, if we were in our own bedrooms, they had cameras that like almost like a Nest camera. They would have cameras planted in the room, around the room. So a camera crew was very rarely ever in your private area. The bathrooms didn't have cameras, obviously. But yeah, the rooms had several cameras at different angles that were set up.
Did you ever have any incidents where you actually, let's say, got a little bit hard and you didn't want it to show on camera when you're making out with these girls?
I'm sure. I mean, I guess I'm pretty good after years of having to hide it so many times as a kid. I'm pretty good at getting it down so it hangs down between my knees. Devin, come on. You just wear tighter. You just wear tighter underwear.
There's a lot of questions about the butler. How did you get along with the butler? Because I guess he did a show where he said he didn't like the girls. He thought they were low class for not liking the food and so forth. Did you get along with them?
Yeah, he was a good guy. Paul Hogan was his name, and he was a great guy. And I do remember now he would roll his eyes a lot when the girls would turn their nose up at certain things, food and stuff. But he was a real butler, Devin. I mean, he was a real butler that they had hired. I mean, and that was good casting because they figured, why are we going to hire a guy and expect him to know what a butler does? They just hired an actual butler. Good guy, really good guy.
Would he be someone you would talk to, since I guess he would have probably been the most down-to-earth guy on the set?
Well, that's the thing. I talked to the production people more than I would talk to the people that were considered the talent on the show. I didn't talk to the girls unless we were filming, and I really didn't talk to Paul unless we were filming. But because Paul was kind of an island unto himself, as far as he was kind of just the butler over here, and then it was me and the girls. Sometimes he would be with production, so I would see him out because I went to dinner a lot with the production crew. Because at first they were going to have me in the chateau with the girls, and then when we got there, they changed up they had me with them, and then when we would need to film, I would go meet the girls wherever we needed to.
Okay. So what happened with you and the girl that you chose, Zora? Why didn't that work out? Obviously, it's not like a real relationship if you're dating under those circumstances, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't go anywhere. We got back to the States, and literally I have to tell people all the time, we had the same flight back, but I went, and no one, at that time we were on that flight, but no one knew, because the show wasn't out yet. So no one knew that we had been on a TV show. And so we were able to walk through the airport and no one knew who we were. But she literally went right and I went left, and we never talked again. Well, we talked a few times over the years, but that was it.
So there was no consummation of that relationship.
No, and it was actually, to tell you the truth, and I've mentioned this a few times. At the time, before I went on that show, I was dating a girl that lived here in Orange County, and it's crazy because even during this show, I was talking to her on the phone. I've told people, if the production company got the phone bill from that hotel in Amboise, which was right outside of Paris, I can't imagine how big that thing was, because I was calling Amy damn near every night, and we were talking for a couple hours every night, and they had to have known. They had to have wondered who I was talking to for 2 hours every night. But and so when I got back, I was kind of eager to get back together with her, and it never happened. She ended up finding somebody else, and I ended up on my tour, my promotional tour.
So no wonder you're a little bitter about the show. You didn't even get one of those girls in the end.
It was a. I got some money out of it, you know what I mean, and I got plenty of girls after that, so it wasn't a total loss.
So yeah, that must have helped you a lot, because I saw some clips. I'm surprised there's no full episodes online, but I saw some clips of the episodes, and they really presented you as a good guy, the boy next door. So that must have helped you in real life. I'm sure there was groupies and so forth.
No, there weren't. No, there weren't any groupies. But you know, Devin, it's amazing because I didn't. It's not like I was an athlete, like a. I don't know, pick somebody like a Mark McGuire who had the most home runs, or it's not, you know, or I had like a number one hit out, and I was a heavy metal band. I didn't have groupies like that. I just if I ever did a signing someplace, or if I had to go to a town to promote, you've got your girls that they want to fuck a guy that's been on TV. I mean, it's some of them are like that, and yeah, I mean, but I never had groupies. I never had a group of girls waiting outside, waiting in the lobby of the hotel. I wasn't like Ric Flair telling them in interviews that I'd be at the Marriott in room 840.
Some people have
It would have been
said
fun.
at that period of time, you were one of like possibly the most famous person in America for that brief period of time where the show was getting those monster ratings. Were you shocked at how well the show did and how big a star you were for that period?
I didn't know any better. The production and the network were telling me how great the ratings were, but I didn't know anything about TV, so I didn't know anything about ratings. I didn't, and they would say, "Hey, last night we had 20 million viewers," and I'd be like, "Is that a lot?" I mean, I was. It was kind of good to be that kind of aloof, um, because I mean, I didn't think about it a whole lot. Well, I sent you the one of the people from the network years ago sent me a framed thing that they thought, and it was a sweet gesture. They sent me a framed, like it had different copies of the rating sheets, and they're all on a mat and everything. And I had them in my storeroom, and I remembered it yesterday when we were talking before this, and I didn't really, I don't know what any of those numbers mean. I mean, I know they're good, and I know that but I never paid attention to it much.
Did the producers try to influence your decisions at all when you were choosing the girls that you were keeping on the show?
Yeah. Um, not they just tried to throw little hints out. Like I think they really wanted me to choose Sarah over Zora. Um, but it wasn't you're going to choose this girl whether you like it or not kind of thing. They just said, they would say, over dinner, don't you like her better? And what is it that you like about this girl over this girl? So I think if they had their way, they would have picked who I'd brought along. But no, I mean, I squashed that when I saw it coming because I was going to pick who I wanted, and that was it.
Were you surprised how well it went when you had to let the girls know that you weren't the multimillionaire?
Um, I wasn't surprised, but I mean, I told Zora. Zora was the one that I divulged it to, and she was such a sweet gal that, I mean, here's a girl that was heating her apartment by turning her stove on, and she lived in Jersey. I mean, and she said that she goes, I heated my apartment with my stove. I mean, if that's not poor, I don't know what is. So, so she was pretty humble, and I, when they offered her, because they offered us $1 million, and if she had said that she wasn't interested in me, I was going to get the whole million, and if she decided to go along with it, she would get half of that million. So it was kind of like being married. She took half of what I had.
Didn't they make you tell the blonde as well before? I seem to recall they made you tell the
Sarah,
second girl.
Sarah.
Yeah.
I think they had me tell Sarah, and she didn't seem to well. See, here was what they would do, and this is a trick. So what they did with Sarah, she wasn't disappointed when I told her. But what they did to Sarah was they had Sarah go down to the area, the foyer of the chateau where the couch was. And this is a little trick that they use. They she they had her go down there, we'll say at 10 o'clock in the morning, get ready, get on. And they make her sit there for 3 hours. Well, it's like sitting in the doctor's office. After about the first hour, you're like, what the fuck are we doing? And that's exactly what she did. She started getting antsy. Why can't I leave? Oh, we're getting lighting right. And I remember, God, I think it was Paul that told me that they did that because he was there the whole time. And he goes, yeah, he goes, they made that poor girl sit there for 3 hours. Well, by the time we shot, she was pissed.
Right.
And they did was they were filming her the whole time for that 3 hours. So what they did was, if you notice in the show, I tell her, yeah, I'm not really a millionaire. I'm this construction worker. And they cut to her face. Well, they cut me totally out. And they cut to her with this, pissy face. Well, that was from 2 hours before when they made her sit there.
Right.
That makes sense?
And in those days, I don't even think there was text messaging yet. It may have just been starting, or internet on the phone. So she wouldn't even have had a cell phone really to play around on.
Can you imagine sitting there for 3 hours and nothing to do but stare at the wall and a bunch of production people? You weren't allowed to talk to anybody, and that's what they did. So to get the reaction, the sour puss reaction on her face, they put her through that for 3 hours, and that's kind of ingenious to think about something like that,
So what was your favorite part of the show? I know there's a lot you didn't like, but there had to have been some highlights for you. Other than the money.
Yeah. Um, the people that I mean, there were some pretty good people on that production crew and the friends that I made and the travel, we went all through the south of France. We went to Corsica and we went to Cap Ferrat, and just the experience. I mean, I was able to stay in a $5,000 a night room in Cap Ferrat at the Grand Hotel for 2, 3, almost 4 nights. And, that was, I mean, who gets to experience that, Devin? So I don't regret any of that. I mean, it was a good time. And then, yeah, it was just the experiences of it.
You had a lot of meals that looked really delicious. Was there one particular meal that stands out to you that was your favorite?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There was one that no one ever saw, and it was when I was having dinner with the production company that night in a little teeny restaurant. I mean, I don't even know how we fit in this place, and it was in the town where we were staying in Amboise, France. And I didn't speak French, and we had people there that did, but I just said I was jonesing for a steak, but they didn't have steak. They had this sliced beef that came, and I'm telling you, I've never seen a plate of beef like this in my entire life. It was just nothing but beef, sliced beef. And to this day, I've never had a steak or beef like it since. I don't know what they did, but I always remember that meal.
Now, France has a reputation for being rude to Americans and not liking Americans very much. Did you notice that, or did everyone treat you pretty well?
No, I didn't. I didn't notice that much at all. And when we were filming, I had a PA that was supposed to kind of be my handler that would follow me around and make sure I didn't get into trouble. We got along with the people in the little towns and stuff wherever we would go. And yeah, no, everybody was very, very friendly.
The craziest part of your whole experience, from listening to some of the other interviews you did with Rick Bassman on his Talking Tough podcast and some other ones, was that you were making tons of money from appearances after this show ended, and you actually had enough and stopped making these 10 to 15 grand appearances for just sitting in a mall doing autographs.
It was, yeah. I mean, I I just needed a break. I was, and this isn't the kind of break that I just wasn't having fun. And I know it's hard for people to. That's why it's difficult. That's why I don't talk about it much, because it's difficult for people to relate to. You're by yourself. basically because I had a security guy that Fox put with me that would go with me, but it's just a lonely, I don't know. I was in a different city every day, and I was worn out from the travel. And I'll tell you the big part was that I was getting sick of repeating myself. People asking me the same questions over and over and over. And I just literally, I was just worn slam out, Devin. And, that's why I think, God, at least if I'd been wrestling, I'd have had a camaraderie, almost like a fraternity of guys, and you're having fun, and and you're maybe making money. And even if you're not, there's a purpose. I had no purpose, man. I was landing in the middle of the night, sleeping for a couple hours. I'd have, depending on what coast I was on, I'd have to wake up at, 3 o'clock here to do a 6 o'clock interview on the East Coast for a radio station. And I'd just flown in and gotten in at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that happened a lot. And then I'd be whisked off to a mall to do these signings. And then I'd try to get back to the hotel to sleep, but I couldn't because I had to do TV interviews. And even the security guy that was with me, who was a really good guy, Bruce was his name. He said to me one night at dinner, he said, I've been on I've taken care of the affairs of a lot of people for Fox. And he goes, I've never been in anything like this in my life, because everywhere I went, he had to go. So I was sleep deprived. That meant he was sleep deprived. And I mean, he looked at me one night over dinner, and his eyes were like red holes. He just kind of looked up at me. He was like, man, he goes, how do you do this? I said, I don't do this. I said, thank God there's some alcohol and but this is before Red Bull. I wish Red Bull had been around then. I would have loved it. All I did, Devin, was I wasn't saying I was sick of the money, because how do you get sick of it? I just wanted a break. I just told my manager, I said, man, I need to ratchet this back and let me take a couple weeks off. And he said to me, he goes, well, you can't take a couple weeks off. The minute you're gone, you can't go back through that door. You got to keep that, and I didn't believe him. And he was right. I think I took a month off from making appearances just so I could, and he couldn't book me on anything after that. It was crazy. Because TV had moved on to the next big thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
TV had moved on. And that's fine. I made some good money. I spent a lot of money, partied a lot. And I had a good experience and just chalked it up to that.
Any crazy fan incidents doing those tours or anything like that?
I gotta say no. Nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, if it might come to me, nothing is standing out. I know there was a girl in Valdosta, Georgia, that yeah. Anyway, that was, yeah. But we won't go there.
All right. Did you ever get married or anything in real life? No,
never.
Didn't throw in the towel yet.
Do I?
You didn't throw in the towel yet.
No,
You're still out there.
No.
Now, I guess probably if that whole Joe Millionaire thing didn't happen, you did a great accomplishment, by the way, with those ratings. It is impressive, even though it doesn't seem like you did anything. You got killer ratings, which is hard to do. Is there any reason why you think the next season of the show was kind of a failure? Because I think they only ever did 2 seasons.
Can't do it twice.
Yeah.
I think, once you do something like that, and I've never, Devin, I'll just make this, I'll kind of set everybody straight. We didn't get the ratings because this mug was on it. We got the ratings because of the concept of the show. They could have put any fella in there and had that concept based around any guy. And I will believe that till the day I die. There was nothing I did that drove those ratings. It was people were interested in the concept of the show, of girls that were being duped and were considered gold diggers, and any guy could have stepped into that spot and probably even done a better job than I did. So, and that's not me trying to be humble. I have never been able to figure out why people would 40 million people would tune in to see a guy that did nothing. I mean, and that's how I feel about it.
Well, I've heard you say you would have been a good heel in wrestling. That's not a very good heelish answer.
Yeah. One of the best trips I took was to Canada, to Edmonton. And is there a big mall in Edmonton?
West Edmonton Mall.
And there's a hotel attached to that mall.
The Fantasyland Hotel.
That's exactly what it was. And there was a girl, her name was Desiree. I know her last name, but I'm not going to say it because I don't have any Canadian viewers yet. And this girl was hotter than donut grease. And she was talking to somebody, I think it was her sister, in the lobby of that mall. This girl, and I told the promoter he had gotten Osborne tickets. Just happened to have tickets to go to the Ozzy Osbourne concert in Edmonton, and just said, hey, after we go do the signing, do you want to go later that evening? And I'm literally like, it was again, I was like tired, but I'm like, shit, I ain't missing Ozzy Osbourne, right? And he goes, I got an extra ticket. I'm like, and I just kind of standing there. I'm like, I'm gonna go ahead. And I didn't know this girl from Adam. And I walked up to her and I just started talking to her. I'm like, hey, we're going to an Ozzy Osbourne concert. Lady, want to go? She's like, yeah. And she ended up flying out. I did a thing for Lifetime Television, if you can believe that. I did a movie called See Jane Date. I had a bit part in it. And she flew to, they were filming it in Montreal. And she flew to Montreal, and man, that girl. Yeah. Those are the memories that put a smile on my face, though.
So you just lost touch with her, I guess.
Yeah, she ended up. Yeah, I mean, I came back to the States, and she was up there, and yeah, and she married a fireman. She was a really good gal. God, she was hot. Oh God, she was hot. I didn't even deserve that.
I'm going to guess you probably didn't have much social media back then, so it'd be more difficult for randoms to contact you.
Thank God. And there was no iPhones. There was no cameras. It was good Lord. I would have had a, oh, it would not have been good.
Now, you mentioned you were in that Lifetime movie. I guess we have a lot of Charmed fans on my channel because I had a lot of people that wanted me to ask you about your appearance in Charmed.
Yeah, it was, that was a bit part two. And I think that's where the one, if I'm not mistaken, that's where there was a little bulldog and that turns into me, or I turned into the bulldog, one of the two. But yeah, that was, what was the name of the girl that was on Charm that dated Marilyn Manson? God, what was her name?
I only know Shannon Doherty that was on 90210. I don't know who the other ones were.
I'm trying to think. Cute girl, but not real. I didn't get a very good reception from mainstream TV and movie people. I mean, there were a few people that were nice. Like Vivica Fox. I actually went out with her to dinner one night. She was a sweetheart. She was extremely down to earth. But like I said, Ashton Kutcher was just not a very, to me at least, he was just very. And I mean, I hate to say that about people. I mean, I just my experience is my experience, and it was just, who is this guy that's come along who's in this alternative television genre that's all of a sudden the network's golden child, and I didn't know why I was there, and a lot of these actors and actresses were kind of taking it out on me, and I'm like, I'm just here. I was just asked to be here, God, I can't think of that girl's name, but I remember I tried to talk to her on set, and she just kind of wouldn't have anything of it. But whatever.
What was Ashton Kutcher doing there?
So when Fox was trying to promote the show, they had me go to a movie premiere, and they had already divulged who I was on Entertainment Tonight. So I go to the movie premiere, and it was God, why I can't think of that movie is beyond me. God, tell you, getting old as a son of a bitch, down. It was him, and was it Jessica Simpson? what was the movie that they had that came out in 2003?
Someone will put it in the comments.
Yeah, and if they can't, anyway, he didn't like me being at that premiere. He didn't like it at all, and I think he made that known to a few people at the network because it kind of stole his thunder. And I'm thinking, man, look at me. How am I going to steal you? I mean, you're an established actor. I'm here for a cup of coffee. You know, don't that's what I was thinking. I'm like, don't get hot under the collar. I'll be gone. You know, I didn't know that, but yeah. So he didn't, and then I would see him in the green room of a couple of other shows, and he just wasn't a very personable guy, and that's fine. It's not a big deal. I took it with a grain of salt.
The Simpsons appearance that you did, that must have been pretty cool.
Yeah, that was very cool. Probably took me longer to get to the studio than it did to record the voiceover, but yeah, that was really cool. To even say you've been on it, you know, I mean, whether I had one line or two lines, or it was just cool that they included me in that. That's something that not many people get to do.
How was Howard Stern to meet?
Howard Stern was great. I loved Howard Stern, and it's funny because the way the interview went with them kind of picking at me and whatnot, and the way they actually really were with me when the cameras were off, it was great. It was a great experience. That was one of the perks of that show, was to be able to go on Howard Stern. He's a very nice guy.
What about Regis?
Yeah, Regis was quick, and it was just a quick question and answer, and they were nice people. I liked them a lot. Regis and Kelly, she was pregnant at the time, I believe. So yeah, I came out and I was going to touch her belly just to kind of get in, and got a pretty good fan. I can remember somebody was pregnant, but I can't remember Ashton Kutcher's great.
Well, I guess it couldn't have been that memorable of a movie.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Damn it, the screen. I'm right about to ask you about the wrestling stuff, but the screen, okay, it's coming, it's moving now. I think something just happened with the connection. But so at some point in time, I guess just after the show finished, WWE contacted you somehow about appearing and doing an angle with Trish Stratus. What happened with all of that?
Okay, so when I was training with UPW and Rick Bassman down in Huntington Beach, I was living. I had moved from the apartment that I lived in across from Gold's when I worked for California Protein. And there was a guy that owned Gold's named Ed Connors. And if anybody's ever been around Gold's or wrestling, they know who Ed Connors is. And Ed basically, at the time, recruited bodybuilders. He did more in bodybuilding than he did for wrestling, but he recruited a lot of bodybuilders for a guy, Joe Weider. If you remember Joe Weider with Muscle Fitness. And so Ed had just approached me one day at the gym, and actually Joe DeAngelis, who I trained with, said, "Hey, this guy Ed asked about you and said that he thinks that you would make." Asked if you were interested in getting into wrestling, and I said, "Well, I've thought about it, and I have a buddy who is actually involved in it right now, talking about Sean O'Hare, which his real name is Hare, and they wrestling people put the O on the front." And I said, "Yeah, I'll talk to him." Well, Ed approached me, and this was long before the show. It's a couple years before the show, and just said, "Hey, I don't know what you're doing." I said, "Well, I'm trying to get out of this supplement thing, and I'm going to need a place to go." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I have an apartment right below the place where I live, and I've got some bodybuilders that are living upstairs, but feel free to live there and train and go work out, and I'll introduce you to Rick Bassman and the whole 9 yards." So anyway, fast forward to when the show was done, the show was, over. Ed had always said when we would talk to him that he knew the McMahons really well, and that he would talk to Shane on occasion, because unbeknownst to a lot of people, and this isn't a knock on John. Actually, I think it's very, it's actually really cool. John Cena, when we were all training at Gold's, John Cena was training at Gold's, but John Cena was also worked at the pro shop making the protein shakes. And because it's hard work, I would be good when I'd go in there and I'd make small chat with him. He was an Ed Connors guy and put him up for a while at his place. But it was crazy because it's when he had the crew cut and he was prototype. Um, but yeah, and that's where he got his. Those were his innings. So Ed had a lot of influence on guys back then. Just to give you, just to set you up for the story. But Ed just told me, yeah, I talked to Shane McMahon, and he knows that, you had some formal training in wrestling, and, he knows the ratings on your show, and they a good addition to maybe a storyline on their program. Now, he didn't say WrestleMania, he just said on their program. So I didn't think anything of it. And he said, would you mind if I gave him your phone number? And I said, no, absolutely. And I'm thinking, Shane, I'm never going to hear from that guy, right? One day, I was on Lincoln Boulevard in Marina del Rey, and we just talked, and he was super nice. I mean, really, really nice. And he was very, very, uh, he congratulatory about my ratings and the popularity of the show. Didn't say that he'd watched the show, just said that he'd seen that it was a hit. And then that's when he pitched me kind of the idea that he had about me doing a kind of like a storyline build up on Raw or SmackDown. I can't remember which one, with Trish Stratus, where I would slap her and it would build into the storyline that would end in WrestleMania. And I just, Devin, after the whole thing with the people, because I would go to motocross events with buddies of mine while I was back, and people would recognize me in the crowds, and I'd get a lot of negative feedback from some people. I'm not going to call them fans because they obviously weren't. So I just immediately just started thinking, this me slapping a girl, whether it's scripted or not, on national TV. I said, and I'm not even so sure that Fox would go for that because I was still under contract with them. They had a 2-year contract on me, which kept me from doing a lot of things. So I just said, not poo-pooing it, I just said to Shane, I said, well, Shane, I said, that's interesting. I said, well, what do you think about, and this was gutsy on my part because I just, I was trying to think of anything to get away from that idea. But I just said, what do you think? I'm this new guy, this new millionaire that's just come under all this money. And what do you think about a guy like, the kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing, jet flying, limousine riding son of a gun, taking me under his wing and showing me how to dress, because it would be pretty much a spinoff of what they did in the show where they were, teaching me what fork to use for what salad and all this. He takes me under his wing and he's showing me how to dress and he's showing me how to spend money and he's showing me, and he actually said to him, God, that's an interesting idea there. I never even thought of that. That's where it ended. I had mentioned something to Fox. The girl that was my connection over at Fox, Missy Halpern with Talent Relations, and she just said, no, I don't think they're going to go for that over at Standards and Practices. And I never pursued it. And today I kind of wish I had, but shoulda, coulda, woulda.
So you never reached out to them again when your Fox contract ended?
No, I never did. Never did. But that was an interesting. By the time the Fox contract was done, I was off on a whole nother. I was not in a good place in my life. I wasn't. I was in this transition because I was a game show host for the Game Show Network, which a lot of people don't know, for a show called Fake a Date, and we did one season of that, and then they canceled it. Thank God. And then I was in this transition point where LA didn't want me or Hollywood didn't want me. I wasn't so sure I wanted to be there, and I moved to Orange County, and I was just drinking a lot and partying and spending money and acting like it was. So it was. I'm not so sure I was in the right place to make a decision about my future around that time. Anyway, does that make sense?
Yeah. And I've heard Rick Bassman say that it's even in his book that you are one of the guys that he believes could have been a big superstar in wrestling. And of course, he helped train John Cena, the Ultimate Warrior, Sting. He knows a few things about what he's talking about, and he has no reason to put you over otherwise.
Well, let me say this about Rick. I like Rick. I like Rick a lot, but some of the things that I hear when I hear a wrestling interview, whenever they start talking about the Ultimate Warrior and uh, uh, Sting, I know about John Cena being trained under Rick. There's no denying that. But to me, Rick doesn't get enough credit for getting Sting and the Ultimate Warrior into the business, and it kind of sucks. I mean, he just kind of gets pushed aside. But I mean, I think he had a huge influence on them getting into the business, and I just don't think he gets enough credit for it. But that's them. I mean, we're not,
What was your training itself like at Bassman School?
Well, I was thrilled to be there because I believe. I mean, I've said this in another interview a while back that I was there because well, let me go back. I never really knew how to break into the business. I wasn't around people, and I wasn't the kind of person that was going to go up and go, "Hey, man, see if you can get me backstage so I can talk to some people." And it wasn't like it was back in the day when you just kind of fell ass backwards into it. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, back in the day, a wrestler in the industry had to approach you, and say, "Hey, I think the closest I came to that was this guy Ed." But I noticed, and maybe Rick will corroborate this, and maybe Tom Howard will too, who was my trainer, who
Yeah.
had a ton of talent.
I'm supposed to interview him soon, by the way, so I will ask him.
You'll really like Tom a lot. He's a good guy. The difference between, and this is just between me as a student there and a lot of the other, and I say a lot of the other students that were there, was they wanted to be there because they wanted to be a star. They had watched Raw the past 3-4 years. They wanted to be like The Rock. They wanted to make money. Which everybody wants to make money. I was an actual student of the profession. I watched the tapes and I watched the wrestlers from when I was young, and I kind of thought to myself, if I was going to do this, this is who I would take little bits from. And so I was there because I was genuinely a fan of the craft, and not so much the fan of becoming Austin or Rock or all these people. I mean, and I would hear students. I mean, there was one girl, Lauren was her name, and she, no, that wasn't her name. What the heck was her name? Anyway, I heard her openly say, "I want to be the next China." Well, for starters, that's not setting your goals too high, and I'm nothing against China. I mean, she was a hell of a physical specimen, but she saw China and she wanted to be the next. And I'm thinking, don't. That's fine, but are you doing it because you want to have her fame and notoriety? Or are you doing it because you genuinely love the business? So, I mean, that was. I mean, I don't even know where I got off on that, but.
You were talking about you enjoyed your training because you liked the business, so you weren't there to be a star.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to make it and be successful, but I really, everything that I did or I felt I wanted to do, not necessarily to impress Rick or Tom, but I wanted to do it because this was a career path that I was now kind of exploring. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I wanted to, because I always liked Rick Rude, and because I had, and I swear to God, I'm not, when people say you have a similar, because I had a physique that was similar, was I cut as that guy? Nah. But I love.
You were close. I'll give you that. If that picture you sent me, you're pretty damn close.
Yeah, I mean, and I loved his aggression. I loved the way he threw his punches. I loved Tully Blanchard's cowardice. I loved the way Tully Blanchard would bump and do the butt scoot, back to the corner. I watched stuff like that, and I would watch tapes and tapes and tapes and tapes and tapes. But the thing was, I'm 6'5", I'm 260 plus. Who am I really going to be doing? Like even Rick Rude, I think was like what 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, 230 maybe.
Yeah, and so I learned quickly that I'm a big guy, so I'm gonna have to move like a big guy, and I'm not gonna be powdering like a Tully Blanchard. I mean, I might, but it's going to have to be a Nathan Jones or somebody that's making me do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. I could have that all wrong, but yeah.
So one of your matches was against Brian Kendrick. I'm not sure the other one was against, but could you go through that match with Spanky and what that experience was like?
I was petrified. Uh, I was actually hoping that Brian was going to call it in the ring, and we were there, and he just kind of laid it all out, and I'm going, man, there's just no way that I'm going to remember this in the moment. And I think actually, to tell you the honest truth, and he might not even remember this. He's done so much in his life since that little piss ass match. But he did call some things for me, and it ended up being pretty smooth. And according to Rick, Rick thought it was a great match. And the other guy I had a match with was Alcatraz. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Oh, no problem. You can get that if you want.
No, I'm. Let me tell him. I just sent him one of those. Can I call you later? I had a match with Alcatraz, and he was a great guy. He lives just south of me here in San Diego. He was a good dude. Yeah. Well, that's why I didn't want I think you posted something yesterday about he's a wrestler. I'm like, no, I'm not a wrestler. I mean, I was there for literally. I was there. I walked in the front door and walked right out the back. I'm like, I was involved, and then when I was training, and then eventually when I did the TV show, a lot of the guys that I was training with and that I saw backstage at the WWE events, when I would go with Rick, I had more of a rapport with, because then you're in this club, because I'm on TV and they're on TV. So I got to see a lot of things and a lot of people don't get to see. So that was,
Well, I don't mind calling you a wrestler because you're a big, scary-looking guy. We got the Orange Cassidys now, the Kevin Owens, all these guys that don't look like they even work out, parading around as wrestlers, which is probably one of the reasons why business is so bad these days. But you almost had a match with Kevin Nash, I guess, at one point.
No, so that was another one. So Rick had booked Hall and Nash to come in for a show that he was doing. And originally he wanted me to team with Tom Howard for the show. And again, I brought it up to Fox, which to this day, and Rick and I have talked about it. I mean, I should have just asked for forgiveness instead of permission, because how cool would it have been to at least have, Scott Hall, knee me in the corner and give me a flipper punch, and kind of get up and then just give me an elbow. He ended up taking me off. I ended up being a referee for that program instead of a wrestler or competitor, and a tag partner of Tom's. And it's one of those ones. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. But again, I wasn't looking back now. I should have just done it and said, "To hell with you, I'm doing it."
It's too bad there's no footage of any of that.
Well, and the funniest is I was so caught up in the moment, Devin, that Scott Hall looked over at me and said, I'm like, and I said something like, "All right, let's go." And Scott Hall looked at me and goes, "Well, are you going to ring the bell?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, ring the bell." It was pretty funny. You had to be there.
Do you have any stories about John Cena from when you knew him, when he was working at the gym?
No, no, I didn't interact with him much then. I just knew that he was kind of the next big thing that was the talk around the gym, and there was the talk over UPW, and Ed Connors was his biggest fan, and he goes, "John's going to be huge," and how he predicted that is beyond me. But he was always really respectful. When I would go in and I'd get a protein shake or whatever, and he was very soft spoken, didn't say a whole lot, but look, whenever I see him on a commercial, or I see him in a movie, or I don't see him in a lot of movies. I don't watch a lot of his movies, but I see a promotion for one of his movies, or I see him, because he's all over everything now.
Yeah.
He is the guy that literally worked from the bottom up. I mean, I knew him when he was making $6 an hour, maybe less than that, working at the pro shop in Gold's. I mean, it's crazy. And now the guy is a household name, and, and good for him, man. Good for him. I mean, he deserved it.
Probably the last of the big stars in wrestling, not quite at the Steve Austin level, but there hasn't been anyone bigger than him, I don't think, since.
Well, I don't even follow it anymore. I mean, I think I quit watching after Evolution, after that whole time, which was like, what, 05?
Yeah.
Evolution done in 05, 06.
And speaking of Evolution, you've had some experiences with Ric Flair. I know you gave him a steroid shot at one point. You partied with him over the course of a couple days. What are some of your memories of Flair?
So Flair, my interaction with him started at a backstage chance meeting in Anaheim Pond. We went backstage. I think it was me and Rick and Matt Weesey, who was Triple H. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to go say hi and introduce myself. It just so happened that Chris Jericho, Triple H, and Ric Flair had the same PR person as I did. And her name was Nicole Nasser. And I went to a morning show called Cold Pizza, and it was used to be on ESPN, I believe. And when I walked into the green room, there was Rick, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to be." We talked in the green room before we both went out for our segments, and he said, "I'm going to be in LA on this date," and he goes, "Give me a call," and he gave me his number. And so I called him a couple weeks later. I called him and he answered, and he said, "I'm going to be up here for a week. I got the wife here right now, but she's flying back to Charlotte, and I'm just going to be here by myself." And I said, "All right." So I mean, it wasn't anything, earth shattering. We hung out by the pool and drank, and he wasn't, I don't hate to disappoint people, but he wasn't dancing on the bar with the robe on and all. It's funny because I hear all these stories about him partying and people not being able to keep up with him and all this, but he was very reserved, very reserved. We were down at the bar in the hotel. He was getting back. I mean, I know that's odd to hear, but he was like, "Nah, I got to turn in. I got an early day tomorrow." And I said, "Okay." And I mean, and he did that several nights. So I don't know. I mean, it's just hard to believe that everybody's on all the time for 50 years of your life. You know what I'm saying? Where they're constantly, you need to unwind at some point.
How
But
was he with the ladies?
yeah, I mean, he was just, I mean, no different than any that you or I would be standing at the bar. If there's a pretty gal there, he was talking to her. You know what I'm saying? And did I see him going up to the room with anybody? No, but did I see him conversing and having a good time? And one thing I will say about the guy is that he was very respectful. When I would see him, was dating a girl at the time. Her name was Lisa Ligon, and she had a dance group that did a lot of Harley Davidson conventions, and they were called the Perfect Angels. And we went out with Rick to a nightclub in LA, and I remember her saying to me, she goes, "I've never met Rick before, but he's just a very, very nice guy." Yeah, and we would witness him. He's very into, what the girls were doing, and it was just, I mean, I had a good experience with him.
Now, you also popped a girl's zit in front of him, I guess. Were you trying to impress him?
I don't know if I was the first person to ever gross Ric Flair out, but this girl walked up to us. We were at the Viceroy, at the pool at the Viceroy, and we were just laying there, and these girls were talking. They recognized him, and they were talking, because I mean, it was hard not to recognize him. I mean, with the blonde hair and everything, and he's a pop culture guy. And this girl, and I remember she was a good looking gal, but she kept complaining. She's like, "Oh God, I got this thing on my back," and I'm like, well, let's see it. And so she turned around and it was a blackhead. And I just said, well, hold on, I think it's a blackhead. Let me get it. And God. And Rick, I just thought, I would want somebody to do that for me. I mean, I'm no skin doctor, but I popped this blackhead, man, and it was anyway. It about grossed Rick out, and I think he had a whole new respect for me after that. He was like, shit, I could run with this guy. He's not afraid of anything. So,
was he trying to encourage you at all to get into wrestling, or did that even come up in the subjects?
No, we didn't. I didn't bring it up. I think it might have come up once, where he had known, and he might have found out through somebody, because I didn't talk about it much. I mean, Devin, it's been 16 years. The only time any of my wrestling past or being involved with people has come up just recently. I don't discuss it. And I sure as hell didn't discuss it then. So I think somebody had brought it up to him that I used to train, and he asked me something about it and said something, if you ever want to, hop in the ring, but we left it at that. We didn't.
And I think this is the first time you're actually discussing your wrestling past on camera. So
Yeah.
It's my first part of convincing you to come to Great North Wrestling when the lockdown ends and get in the ring.
Yeah. God. Wow.
You got to get at least one match on tape before you're too old.
Yeah, I know, right? God.
Now, as far as Luther Reigns, you mentioned him. He's a pretty. I've seen some videos that he's put out himself. He's a bit of a wild character too. He's known for his strippers and so forth. What's he like to go out with?
Well, Matt doesn't drink. I don't know if people don't know that. Matt, when we were with Matt, when we were going out to the bars with Matt and hanging out with him, he has a Red Bull in one hand and a cigarette in the other. And that was, and he, and that's his drink of choice, Red Bull. I think he's had some heart issues, so I think he's kind of cut back on that. At least I hope he has. I haven't seen him in at least 2 years, but Matt's a good guy, man. I've always liked Matt a lot. He just is. He's real kind of understated. Real doesn't say a whole lot unless he doesn't speak unless he's spoken to on his own accord. But he loves the strippers. I mean, who doesn't? But Matt really loves the strippers. And I've seen some lookers with that guy. He can pull a girl.
Yeah, I saw a video that Rick Bassman sent me of, I guess it was like a home video or something that Luther had recorded with a couple of them in his house. And of course, he's smoking the cigarettes too. But what's he doing now? I haven't heard much from him in recent years.
And I could be totally wrong about that. I know that he's involved with a pizza chain that his mom owned. And then he started, or he either inherited this pizza chain, or he has something to do with a pizza company, and they do pretty well. And then I think he has some stuff that goes on he has some stuff in Vegas. I don't know exactly what it is. Could be securities. I don't know what it is, but he's not doing bad for himself. And I'm happy too, because he's a good guy. He's one of the good ones. I wish he was healthier, because I'm waiting every day to get a call saying that, he's not with us, and I hope that never happens, at least for a long while. But
it seemed like heart problems are a very common thing with wrestlers. I guess we take a lot of uppers and so forth, and all the years of, as you call it, the hamburger helper doesn't help.
No,
but
I would be so hot when I was living at Ed's house, and I was dating a girl at the time, and she would come over, and your girl wants to sleep. Like, I was like a human heat pump. And she would always want to like drape an arm over, and we were living in the basement, or I was living there, and she was coming over and staying. And we had this. I was right outside you walked out of my apartment up the stairwell. You could go right out on the beach in Venice, and there were a lot of nights I'd go out there and just lay I'd take a towel in the middle of the night, because I was just so hot, because your blood pressure is so high. And that's not a good thing. But
now, for Sean O'Hare, I was doing an interview with Butterbean yesterday about their fights. Sean O'Hare has a reputation as a great street fighter. I know you know a thing or two about Sean's street fighting history. For whatever reason, it didn't seem to translate into professional fighting. But what are some stories you could share with us about Sean? At one point, he was one of the hottest up and comers in wrestling, but unfortunately, he ended up being another tragedy.
Yeah, so that's another one. A lot of people don't know that I went to school with Sean. I went to 5 years of military school when I was a kid, and I just didn't play well with others as a kid, and it was just an option that I was given at age 13. And Sean ended up coming along, and when he got to the school, all the cadets, there were probably close to 600 cadets at the school at the time, and Sean stood out because he was always and a lot of people don't know this. I mean, it's just crazy my connections over the years with these guys, but Sean was a big kid. I mean, he was as a kid, it had to have been 6'2", 6'3", and I think he was on the shit then. And he had forearms I mean, it's the biggest forearms I've ever seen on a kid in a high school, and he had a bad temper. And the story that the guys that know him like to hear, and I mean, it's God rest his soul. I mean, if he liked you, you were in good shape. But if he didn't like you, a punch was coming at some point. You just didn't know when. And that was the thing about him, is that you didn't know when he was going to snap. But the story that I tell, and then and I mean, there's people that'll corroborate it. I mean, they were there that night. We were in study hall one night, and our barracks were the old, well, they still build them this way, but we had the concrete floors, and our barracks were in an L shape. And I was at the one side of the barracks, the one end of the hall, and Sean was all the way down at the end of the hall, and the other end at the end of the tip of the L on this. And during study hall, all our doors had to be open, and there were 2 cadets to a room. And I think I was by myself at that time. I don't know where my roommate was, but there was always a professor from the school that was on study hall duty. We'd have a different professor every night. And it just so happened that the professor that we had that night, Lieutenant Colonel Burke was his name. And Colonel Burke was a big dude. He had to have been 6'8", and he was at least close to 280, 300 pounds. He was a big cat. And everything was quiet. And then all of a sudden we heard this crash. And right shortly after, 10 seconds after, you could hear a lot of screaming. The concrete floor, we could feel the floor of the building like bouncing, almost like it was a little earthquake. Like you could feel it, and you could hear 4 footsteps like running. And I've got my head, I know I wasn't studying because I never studied, but I probably had a dip in and I was reading a Muscle Fitness. And the door to the stairwell was about one room down from mine. So you had about 10 seconds of all this running and screaming. And all of a sudden I see Colonel Burke wore a green uniform. I see this green go by past my door, and then throws the door open. And then I see, we wore blue uniforms. I see this blue fuzz go past, and it was Sean. He was chasing Colonel Burke. Well, no one knew what had happened, and it just so happened they were going down the stairs, and our wrestling coach and assistant football coach, Coach Motley, who was one of the nicest men you've ever met in your life, and he was a pretty jacked dude. He happened to be coming up the stairs when they were running down the stairs, and he tackled Sean. And I've talked to Coach Motley about it a few years back. He works at a funeral home now, and I went over to see him back in Virginia. And I brought that up, and he said, to this day, he says, I can't believe that he didn't kick my ass. Coach Motley said this about, because I tackled him pretty hard. Because I guess Colonel Burke had looked back at him and said, hey, get him off of me. And Coach Motley just went into get him off me mode and tackled him, and said that Sean never touched him. He just kind of held him there. But Sean was pissed. And they swept it under the rug, man. No one, I mean, because that was grounds for dismissal, but no one ever said anything about it. It was talked about, but I don't know how I mean, he was still there. He finished out the year, But he was just from a young age, man. He was just a hothead. And what had happened, I guess, to start it all, I guess he had taken one of Sean's books and slammed it down on the counter and or on his desk. And I guess he kind of just did one of these, where you kind of push somebody's head, and just kind of in an abusive manner. I mean, that the professors around there during that time, this was in the late 80s. You could still smack a kid and get away with it. No one would say anything. And I think he was trying Sean, so Sean took his desk, this is the part, and threw it out the window, or tried to throw it out the window. And that's why Colonel Burke took off like a rabbit.
Wow.
But then we had incidents. Then when I linked up with Sean as an adult here in California, I mean, we would go out to the bars, and we live in a Marine town here. I live in, there's Camp Pendleton right outside of town. And, Sean's a big guy. He's ripped. He's, you get Marines, he gets a few drinks in him, and the Marines would try him. And I mean, I heard instances of, him beating up guys. He got 86 from 2 or 3 bars in town because he would beat up Marines. And, he was just if he liked you, man, he was a good guy. But man, if he didn't, you didn't want to be around him.
Were you surprised when you'd heard he passed?
I'd like to say, yeah, but I don't think people with that mentality are long for this world. They're battling something deeper in their head that any of us can, because he was, like I said, Devin, he was an angry kid. I mean, he was an angry kid. I mean, I witnessed it. I went to school with him. I mean, so he carried this on, but I don't know, man. It's a shame that with all I don't know what kind of, I'm sure he didn't have any, PTSD like a lot of, but it's a shame that with the mental health that they're aware of now, that he couldn't have maybe at least tried to find some kind of, because he's been gone how long now, Devin? Do you know? Do you know what year?
It seems probably at least 10 years. It seems.
Wasn't it like 2012? I could be off on that.
Somewhere around. You're probably right, but it seems like it was a good amount of time.
Well, and I heard he hung himself by his bedpost, which I don't know how you do that, but whatever.
Well, it depends who you're involved with too, and what you're doing. I don't know what he was doing for work at that time, or what he was involved with, but those mysterious suicides happen.
Now, I don't like to tell stories that I hear secondhand, but I knew a guy that he worked with at a nightclub in Hilton Head, and I think this is a police report, but he beat up 2 guys and a girl, and I think he put his fist through their car door window and pulled the guy out. Is how it was told to me. I mean, he was just a different dude, just a different guy.
And the last wrestler I'll ask you about today is Medusa, who I've heard you've had some experiences with. You showed off some of your motorcycle skills there.
I like Deborah. I love Deborah. Deborah, I met when I was working. This was long before the show, and I think this was long before I was even training with Rick. This was in 2000. This was in '98. I met Deborah. She was staying at the hotel where I worked as a bellhop, and she was standing in the driveway. No, she was standing in the lobby, and I just recognized her. I said, "Are you Deborah Michelli?" And she said, "Yeah." And it was from then we were good friends. And then when I ended up doing the show, I didn't even tell Deborah that I trained for a while with Rick. I didn't even tell her about that because I didn't even want to get in. But then when I did the show, she called me after the very first episode. She called me the next day and she goes, "What?" She was like, "What is this?" She goes, "You didn't tell me you were doing this." I'm like, "Well, I was trying to keep it." So anyway, she asked me to do. She knew that I had a Harley, I had a custom Fat Boy, and she asked me to do a charity ride from the Peterson Automotive Center in off Brea in LA to Las Vegas. And I thought, oh, this is great, man. This is great. It's going to be a good time. And so we all met at the Peterson Museum, and it must have been 200-300 bikes there. And I just make a long story short, you have a bike lock for the forks, and I would take the bike lock off and I would put it on my belt loop, and I put it on the one put it on the one on the side. I put it on the one on the back. So when I was riding, I was sitting on the bike lock. So I was reaching like an idiot. Instead of going like around my back, I went across like this, and I was running down alongside some car bumpers, the little bumper stops on the cars, and one of them hit my forward controls, and I just totally ate it. And I'm laying there on my back, and a bunch of people run over, and it was this old man, and this is what we laugh at. I mean, I laughed so hard that night, I almost pissed myself. But there was an old man, and he goes, "What the hell happened to Bob Billionaire?" And she's never forgotten that line. Every time I talk to her, she goes, "So isn't old Bob Billionaire?" So I'm Bob Billionaire now instead of Joe Millionaire. But that's she's a great gal. She is a great gal. If anybody out there ever gets a chance to meet her, if she ever comes into town, tell her Bob Billionaire sent you. But no, definitely go meet her. She is an absolute sweetheart.
She seems like it. And the one thing I can't understand from the interviews I've heard of her, because she seems so nice and bubbly, is that she dated Greg Valentine, who's like the most depressing
I didn't know
asshole
that.
I've ever met. Yeah, she used to go out with Greg Valentine.
Wow. I didn't
And
know that.
if you ever met him, like, he never smiles. And he's just a dick. So it's just an odd pairing.
Wow. I never knew that. But you know what's funny is that when we talk, when we've gotten together, we've had dinner, we don't talk about wrestling. We very rarely talk about wrestling. So I'm not very inquisitive with these people. I mean, I don't sit there and ask them a ton about you know their past. So
Interesting. Well, maybe if I ever do a shoot interview with her, it'll be you doing the interview with her. That
yeah,
might be interesting.
yeah.
I just got to ask you about Playboy Mansion. I mean, I've heard you've been to the Midsummer Night parties there and all that. Is it as crazy as the folklore says?
No, and maybe it was back in the '60s and the '70s and even the '80s. But I know that when we were there, and I've been there several times, again because an ex of mine knew the girl that worked for Hugh Hefner that did all that did all the invites there. But I think and I don't know if this has to do with the way lawsuits are now and the way people are so quick to lawyer up, but I know by the time I got to go to the Playboy Mansion all those different times that you were told to stay in one specific area. You swam in the pool and did stuff, but it wasn't like the '70s when the Rolling Stones would be there and they'd run off to some side, cottage somewhere and bang some chick and come out and people were having sex. And I'm sure that still went on, but I mean, I had a good time. A lot of girls running around. Got a chance to sit in the grotto and and drink a beer, but it wasn't the wild party, the wild sex party that everybody imagines it to be.
You worked with Mariah Carey, I guess, or you were in something with her. What was she like?
Um, again, it was a spot in her video where I played a bodyguard, and they had us in the helicopter, and so the helicopter takes off, and we circled around, and we land, and then I get out, I hold the door for her, and it was a weird, but she and I sat in this helicopter for quite a while in silence because I wasn't gonna, I wasn't. Well, this is the same thing I did with Mark McGuire when he and I went to a charity event, and I got on the flight, and I was sitting across from him on a private jet, and I refused to talk, not because I was being a dick. I just didn't want to bother him like everybody else. But with Mariah, I sat there in silence, and then finally she just, "Where are you from? What's your name?" And started asking me questions, and we started to talk, and she's she's okay. I mean, I've never been a big Mariah Carey fan, but I'm sure she's a nice individual.
And we cover some boxing stuff on this channel. I've interviewed Larry Holmes, Butterbean, Michael Spinks. I understand you have a Muhammad Ali story that you could share with us.
Yeah, it's a personal story that you look back on things that, you you had opportunities for things and things that you might have missed out on. And so I mentioned earlier that I worked at a hotel in Beverly Hills. I was a bellhop, and we would have a lot of celebrities come through there. I checked in Dan Rather. I checked in. He was a cheap ass. I took so many bags up for that guy. Gave me like $2. But I checked in. Checked in LaToya Jackson. I checked in Jeff Bridges, which was cool because I just read an article about him, because Jeff Bridges is a big guitar player. I don't know if you know that, but it was an article in Men's Journal about how he has a spring that he likes to go to up near Ventura, a hot spring, and just play the guitar. And I just read this article, and then I'm checking him in, and as employees of the hotel, we're not allowed to talk to the guests. You take their bags up, you get them whatever they need, and you get the hell out of the room. And I just couldn't hold back. I thought, if I get fired, I get fired. I mean, I'm a huge Big Lebowski fan, and, but I didn't mention anything about that.
You look like the Big Lebowski, by the way.
You what?
You look like the Big Lebowski right now.
Yeah. Hey, man, I've got a beverage here.
Yeah. What is it? A White Russian?
Yeah. Walter, you're just an asshole. But no, so his manager, somebody was there, and I just said, hey, a big fan. I said, I just want to let you know it was a good, this has nothing, we'll get to the Muhammad Ali in a second. But I said, just want to let you know, I said, I read the article in Men's Journal about your little secluded spot. And he goes, is that out already? I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, wow, thanks for telling me. I'm going to run down and stand and grab it. Was it good? I'm like, yeah, it was great. So I had a little banner with him. So that was cool. But Muhammad Ali would come in with his wife, and Lonnie was her name. And I think it was Lonnie. And they would come in, and we would do our bags, and the bellman would do the bags in rotation. So everybody would get a turn. You know what I'm saying? So if there's 6 bellmen on, you never knew who you would get in the rotation. And it seemed like every time that they would come in, I got their bags. And so they'd come in 2-3 times a year, more than that. And I just got up out of this semi-jokey relationship with his wife, Lonnie, and I never really interacted with him because he had the Parkinson's and everything, and he was doing his thing. But she was always really sweet to me. And I did nothing but carry their bags up, and they were just really, they took care of me. They would tip me. And then I go and I do the show, and my mother and father were actually there in the hotel, because they were staying in the hotel, and I was in their hotel near Fox, and I was over having a drink with them in the bar. And Lonnie and Muhammad were checking in. They were coming through the lobby. And I looked at my parents and I said, I used to talk to them or her when I worked here. I'm going to go up and say hi as somebody that's, just wants to say hi, that knows her. Well, when I went up to her, she gave me this big hug, and she goes, oh my God, she goes, Muhammad and I saw you on TV. And I told him, I said, that's the guy from the hotel. That's the guy from the hotel. And I said, oh, wow, that's so cool. And then she turns to me and she says, would your parents like to come up to our room and chat with us for a little bit? And I'm going, holy crap. My dad, I grew up on boxing. My dad loved boxing, and he just thought Muhammad Ali was the greatest thing ever. I had a painter do a picture of Muhammad Ali when he's standing over, I think it was it Larry Holmes? The picture, he's standing over him. Oh God. Anyway, so my father was about to cry. I went back to him. I said, Lonnie wants to know if you guys want to come up and hang out with them in their room and have drinks. And my dad was just like, this is crazy. So I went with them upstairs to their room, and I hung out for about 10 minutes. And then I had a girl come into my room at the St. Regis over where I was staying. And I said to Mom and Dad, I got to go. And I'm looking back now, and I'm going, that girl to go pound sand. I'm with the greatest boxer that ever lived. And Mom and Dad ended up staying there for like an hour and a half. They were there for a long time talking with Lonnie. And it just so happened that they ended up there being used to be. They found out there was a connection between where my father used to work in Norfolk, because Muhammad used to bank at a bank in Norfolk, Virginia, and my dad would see him come through there, and they knew a lot of the same people, so they ended up being up there for an hour and a half, 2 hours talking to them. Anyway, that's my Muhammad Ali story. I had an opportunity to sit with a guy for a while, and I had a girl to bang back at the St. Regis. So that just shows you how stupid I am.
Yeah, that you could have probably banged anyways.
Yeah, she could have waited. Let's put it that way.
Now, speaking of that, I'm going to wind it down here, but I posted in my YouTube story that picture of you with the model or whoever she was that you used to date. A lot of fans wanted to know who that was. So you've already told me off camera, but I think you're at an opening or something, the blonde, white
you're
skirt.
talking about when I was in white. I had a white shirt
Yeah.
on. That was Gabrielle Tuitt.
Okay.
Yeah, Gabrielle Tuitt.
Any other famous models or actresses you've gone out with over the years?
No, I mean, and Gabrielle, basically, I'm not saying that she got where she was because of me, but I mean, she ended up getting a gig on The Price is Right because of going to premieres and being seen with me and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, Gabrielle was good to look at. Let's put it that way. Didn't go much deeper than that.
And I understand you did some tours over in Iraq with the military and stuff. How was that experience?
Loved it. Absolutely. One of the highlights, one of the highlights of my experience being on TV and having that notoriety was going over to Iraq. I mean, my father was in the military. I was going to go into the Marine Corps, and in the last minute just chickened out, which I regret. I believe everybody should serve at least 4 years in the military, and looking back on it now, I wish I had, but it was just a great experience. I love going over there. I love seeing the guys and the gals that are serving for us over there, and that was a highlight. That was a highlight. It actually, I hated to come home. If you went over there and you saw what they went through, because we flew from base camp to base camp and saw, what how they were living, and I mean, and they're fine, but I mean, you go to these camps, these remote camps, and you're just going, God, man, we take so much for granted being back here on the mainland. You know what I'm saying? It's I didn't want to leave them. I was just like, I'm getting ready to go back, and I get to leave in a couple of weeks. I was there for 3 weeks, I believe, moving around, and I felt there's a lot of guilt.
And the last thing I got to ask you about is, because I already told you we cover some UFO content on this channel. The Pentagon recently released some footage. I'm not sure if you've seen this, of some what they call unidentified aerial phenomenon in the sky. Basically, they don't know what it is, other than it has technology, I guess, that we don't know. We don't know if it's China, Russia, or something else. Have you seen those tapes, and what's your opinion on it?
Well, if it is if it is something extraterrestrial, they're coming to the wrong planet. Trust me. They took a hot lap around this big trailer park we call Earth, and they're like, they're getting out of there. No, I haven't heard much about that.
Okay. And any chance of seeing you in the ring again in the future? I know you've had a few health obstacles over the years, but
yeah, I had an injury in 2011, which I think I told you about, where I had a pilon fracture in my ankle that literally blew my ankle apart. And so yeah, but funny enough, Devin, the doctor, when he came in, they were going to amputate my foot because they didn't know if they'd be able to repair the ankle in time to save the circulation with the foot and all that. But he said, I got to tell you, we saved the foot, but obviously I could tell that when I woke up. But he goes, you might not be able to run again. And I'm thinking, don't threaten me with a good time, right?
Yeah.
But no, I was like, Doc, I never ran to begin with. I mean, look at my fat ass, right? No, I mean, I'd probably, honestly, I told you, I think I'd probably be blown up just walking to the ring. I'd be blown up taking a piss before I got to the ring. But I'd love to, man. if I could do that, I would love to, you know,
Well,
or even just a tag match where I could come in and make the save. You know what I'm saying?
next time I'm in LA, we'll see if we can find a ring and train a little bit, because I'd like to see what your skills are.
There you go.
So I know you don't really like promoting yourself too much, but you have a Facebook page. Any other social media where people could see your posts? I know you're very political, which
Yeah,
we don't get into.
I'm probably a little more political than I should be, and I'm going to try to dial that back. But it's just Facebook. I mean, I'm just on there, and I've even considered hopping off of that a couple of times. But the problem with that is that there's so many people that I know from my childhood and from school and whatnot that's why I keep it around. I don't keep it around for anything other than that, you know. And I don't have a lot. I'm not one of these people. I've tried to be very understated the last 16 years. I mean, I don't have 4,000 people in my friends list. I think I've got like 500, 600 maybe. So I don't even flood my social media with a bunch of people, but you know, but I'm there.
And any closing remarks? I appreciate you taking the time to do this with us. You're a really interesting person, and I like how down to earth you are for a reality star, because as we all know, as you mentioned, some of these reality stars suddenly think they're Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, I could, that's a whole nother subject for a whole nother time. But yeah, you just have to realize that there's, you know, I doubt highly I was any positive influence on anyone's life over a show like that. You know what I'm saying? So no one's aspiring to be a reality TV star, just because I was, you know, on a hit show, you know, so.
Well, you're looking more like Bruiser Brody than Joe Millionaire these days. So
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but yeah, okay.
I like it. Well, thanks again for taking the time to chat with us, and I hope the fans like it. Lots of great wrestling content, and good luck getting through the rest of this lockdown. You're back doing construction now, right? Can't believe I didn't bring this up.
Yeah, no, I'm a contractor here in Southern California, and our work's been holding steady even through this COVID. So I'm very fortunate, very, very fortunate.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.